They gave me a medal for Kareth. It sits in a glass case in the hall of the fourth line, where the young ones walk past it on their way to the training pits. They stop. They read my name. Othek of the Vorlon cohort, 3 campaigns, the Frost Star with 2 clasps. Then they look at me when I pass, and there is something in their faces I have learned to recognize. It is hunger. They want the story. They want me to tell them how I held the moon, how I broke the Vor line at the 3rd trench, how a Thren officer became the thing the recruiting songs are made of. So I tell them, but not the story they want. I tell them the truth, and every single time, the room goes quiet in a way that has nothing to do with respect. You want to know what makes a human dangerous in a fight. I can see it in how you lean forward. You think I am going to say they are strong. They are not the way you mean it. A Thren can lift twice what a human can. You think I am going to say they are fast, or that they do not feel pain, or that they breed faster than we can kill them. None of that is the truth. The truth nearly got my whole cohort killed before I understood it. And once I understood it, it changed me into something my own people are not sure they trust. So sit, drink if you are drinking. I will start where it started, on a frozen rock at the edge of the Concord's Reach, where I first learned that everything I had been taught about humans was a beautiful, comforting lie. Kareth was a moon, and barely that. It hung off a dead gas giant like a stone caught in a web, and it had nothing anyone should have wanted. No metals worth the digging. No water you could drink without it eating your insides. The atmosphere was a thin gray smear of frozen air that froze your breath sensors over within the hour, so you walked around half-blind, trusting your suit to tell you what your own eyes could not. But it sat on the only stable jump corridor into the Marin cluster, and the Marin cluster had 9 inhabited worlds, and so Kareth was worth dying for. That is how these things always go. The places worth bleeding over are never beautiful. They are just in the way. I came down with the Vorlon cohort in the 2nd wave. 400 of us dropped into a holdfast that the engineers had cut into the side of a frozen ridge. We were the line. Behind us was a relay station, a few thousand support personnel, and the jump anchor that kept the corridor open. In front of us was a long white slope that ran down into a valley the maps called the Throat, and beyond the Throat were the Vor. You know the Vor. Everyone knows the Vor by now. But back then they were still mostly a rumor to my generation, a thing the old soldiers spoke about in the mess with their eating limbs folded tight. We knew the numbers. We knew they did not break. We knew they came in tides, and that the only way to stop a tide was to be a wall that did not feel fear. We were good at being a wall. That is the Thren way. We are a calm people. We are a counting people. Before any engagement, my commander, Sethik Vorlon, would walk the line and read the math aloud so we could all hear it. Acceptable losses, sustainable rates. Hold until the percentage tips, then fall back to the next prepared position and let them spend themselves on the ground we chose to give up. It is not glorious. It works. We have held corridors for 100 years doing exactly this, and I believed in it the way you believe in gravity. It is just how the universe arranges itself. And then, on the 9th day, the dropship came down out of the gray with a different cohort inside it. I remember it because the engine note was wrong. Our ships sing in a low, even tone, efficient, balanced. This one came in heavy and loud and listing to one side, like something built by people who cared more about getting there than getting there cleanly. It landed hard. The ramp dropped before the dust had settled, and out came the humans. I had never seen one in the flesh. None of us had except the commander. They were smaller than I expected. That was the first thing. In the broadcasts they always loomed, all teeth and noise, but standing on the ice in their patched-up armor they looked almost fragile. Soft-skinned. 2 arms each, only 2, which struck me as a cruel joke, as if someone had built a soldier and then taken half the tools away. They had eyes that faced forward and a smell that came through even the filtered air, something animal and warm. There were 60 of them. 60. We were 400 holding a line that should have had 1,000, and the reinforcement the Concord sent us was 60 soft-skinned bipeds with old rifles and a dropship that listed to one side. I will be honest with you, young ones, because you are old enough now to hear it. I laughed. Not out loud. We are not a cruel people, whatever else we are. But inside, in the place where I kept my real thoughts, I laughed, and I thought, the Concord has written us off. They have sent us a token so that no one can say they sent us nothing. These 60 are here to die slowly so the records will be tidy. Their leader came across the ice to where the commander stood. A human female, I learned later, though we cannot tell their sexes apart by looking, and it does not matter to them the way it matters to some species. She walked like she owned the ground, which on a frozen moon belonging to no one was either confidence or madness. Her name was Sergeant Mara Quinn. She did not salute the way Concord protocol demands. She put her hand up against the side of her helmet in a quick, rough gesture and said something, and the translator in my ear turned it into Concord Standard a half-second late, so I heard her tone before I heard her meaning. The tone was tired. The meaning was, "Where do you want us, sir?" The commander gave her the eastern flank. It was the worst position on the line. The ground there fell away into a gully that the Vor could pour up through under cover, and we had lost 2 listening posts there already. He gave it to the humans because, I understood, he expected to lose it, and he would rather lose the 60 soft skins than 30 of his own. I expected the human to argue, to recognize the death sentence in the assignment. She just nodded, said something short, and turned her people around and marched them east into the worst ground on the moon like he had handed her a gift. That was the second thing I noticed about humans. They do not argue with the assignment. They argue with the outcome. For 3 days the humans dug in on the eastern flank, and we mostly forgot about them. The Vor came twice in that stretch, both times against the center where I held, and both times we did what we do. We let them climb the slope. We let the front ranks get close, close enough that we could see the dead light in their eyes, and then Sethik Vorlon gave the word and we cut them down in overlapping fields and the slope turned black with them. Acceptable. Sustainable. We lost 11 of our own across the 2 assaults, and the commander read the percentages that evening and they were within tolerance, and we slept. The humans, I heard, had not been touched. The Vor were testing the center. They would get to the flanks in time. We all knew it. I did not think much about the 60 until the night of the 4th day, when I drew the watch on the eastern joint, the place where my line met theirs. It is a strange thing, standing watch beside soldiers you do not know, especially soldiers of another kind. You listen to them. You cannot help it. You learn a people by the noise they make in the dark when they think no one is counting. The Thren make almost no noise on watch. We are still. We conserve. A Thren cohort on a night line sounds like wind and nothing else. The humans were never quiet. All night I heard them. Low voices passing back and forth along their trench. Not orders. I knew orders. This was something else, a constant low current of talk, broken up by these short, sharp sounds I did not have a word for yet. I learned later it was laughter. They were telling each other things in the dark on a frozen moon, surrounded on 3 sides, and they were laughing. I thought at first that it was indiscipline. I almost reported it. A noisy line is a line that gets found. But the more I listened, the less it sounded like carelessness, and the more it sounded like a thing they were doing on purpose, a thing they needed the way we need the count. They were holding each other up with their voices. Every time the silence got too long and too cold, one of them would say something and the others would make the laughing sound, and the line would settle and they would keep going. There was one voice I noticed. Younger than the others, it cracked in the middle of words. They called him Bell. Private Tomas Bell, though they mostly just said Bell or sometimes the kid, which I did not understand because they all looked grown to me. Bell talked the most when he was most afraid. I worked that out over several nights. When the sensors picked up movement in the throat, when the rest of the line tightened up, Bell's voice would climb and speed up, and he would tell some long, pointless story about a place he came from, a city with a river through it, and the others would let him. would even ask him questions to keep it going, and I realized they were doing it for him. They were giving the frightened young one a thing to hold so his hands would stay steady. We do not do that. When a young Thren is afraid, we tell him the math. We say the odds are within tolerance, your fear is a malfunction, suppress it. And he suppresses it because he is Thren, and that is what we are. It works. I lay awake that fourth night listening to 60 soft-skinned soldiers talk a frightened boy through the dark, and for the first time in my life, the way we did things felt like it had a hole in it that I had never noticed before. I did not have words for the hole yet. I just felt the cold edge of it. The Vor hit the eastern flank on the 6th day, just before what passed for dawn on Kareth. It was a real assault, not a probe. The sensors lit up all at once, the whole gully boiling with movement, and I heard Sethek Vorlund's voice in the command channel doing what he always did, reading the situation in that flat, calm tone, calculating, deciding which ground to keep and which to spend. And I heard him make the decision I knew he would make, the decision the math demanded. He ordered the humans to fall back to the second line. It was correct. I want you to understand that. By everything I had ever been taught, it was the correct order. The eastern flank was indefensible against a full assault with only 60 soldiers. Falling back to the second line meant giving up the gully but saving the cohort, shortening the line, concentrating force. The humans would retreat through our positions, we would seal the joint, and the Vor would have to pay for the gully again at the next wall. Acceptable. Sustainable. Beautiful even, in the cold, clean way, that good tactics are beautiful. Sergeant Quinn's voice came back over the channel. The translator caught it clean this time. She said, "Negative. We've got a forward post still occupied. Pulling back now means leaving them." A pause, then Sethek Vorlund, patient as stone. "How many in the forward post?" "3. 3 soldiers, you have 57, falling back saves 57. The math is clear, Sergeant, withdraw." And here is the moment, young ones. Here is the exact moment, on the 6th day on Kareth, when I learned the truth I have been telling you about for the last 20 years. Because what Sergeant Mara Quinn said next, I have never forgotten, and I never will. And when I am dead, I want it written somewhere because it changed what I understand the universe to be. She said, "The math doesn't include them, sir, and I don't leave the math out." And then she went off the command channel, and she took her people, 57 of them, and instead of falling back through our line to safety, she turned them around and went down into the gully, into the rising tide of the Vor. After 3 soldiers, a calm and reasonable commander had already counted as lost. I was at the eastern joint when it happened. I saw them go. I want to tell you it looked heroic. It did not. It looked insane. It looked like watching someone walk into a fire to retrieve a thing the fire had already taken. The Vor were coming up the gully in their thousands, and the humans went down into them in a thin, ragged line, 60 soft skins against a flood, firing as they went. And I stood there at the joint with my 4 arms full of weapon, and I did not move because I was Thren. And the order was to seal the joint and hold, and going down after them was not in any version of the math I had ever been taught to count. Sethek Vorlund's voice was in my ear telling me to hold the joint, and down in the gully I could hear them, the humans, over the open channel they had left running, and they were not screaming. That is the part that broke something in me. They should have been screaming. Instead, I heard Sergeant Quinn calling out position, steady, and I heard the young one, Bell, the frightened one who talked too much, and his voice was not talking too much anymore. It had gone low and even and certain, and he was calling out targets for the soldier beside him, covering an advance into a place no sane creature would advance into, for 3 lives that were already statistically gone. They reached the forward post. I do not know how. The sensors were a smear of bodies and the gully was chaos, and somehow the thin, ragged line of them punched down through the tide and reached the 3 soldiers in the post, and I heard Quinn's voice say one word, clear over the channel. "Got them." Got them, 2 words really, but the way she said it, you would have thought she had won the whole war. And then they had to come back up. And coming back up through a gully that had closed behind them like a wound, 60 softskins carrying 3 more, that was when the cost came due. I heard it come due over the open channel. I heard names. I heard the human soldiers calling each other's names in the dark, and I learned the terrible thing about those names, which is that each time one was called and did not answer, the others did not stop. They adjusted. They closed the gap. They kept coming up. I broke the order. I have never told you this part, and I am telling you now because you are old enough and because I am too old to be ashamed of it anymore. Sethik Vorlon told me to hold the joint, and I broke the order. I took my section, 40 of the Vorlon cohort, and I went down off the joint into the top of the gully, not because the math told me to, because it did not, but because I could not stand at that joint one more second listening to those people come up out of the dark refusing to leave each other behind while I, a soldier, a real soldier, the kind they make the songs about, stood safe and counted. We met them coming up, 40 Thren and what was left of the 60. We put our backs into the gap and we held the top of the gully while they came through, and I will tell you, young ones, that I have never in my life fought the way I fought in that gap, because for the first time I was not fighting to keep a percentage within tolerance. I was fighting to keep a door open for people who had refused to walk through it without the ones behind them. We sealed the joint when the last of them was through. 41 humans came up out of that gully. 19 did not. They brought the 19 with them, every single one. They would not leave the bodies. I watched them carry their own dead up through the tide rather than make better time. And when I understood that they were doing it on purpose, that it was not panic or confusion but a thing they had decided, I felt the cold edge of that hole I had noticed on the 4th night. And I felt it open all the way up into something I did not have a name for. We held Kareth. That part you know, it is in the records. The frost star, the 2 clasps. The center held and the flank held and the corridor stayed open and the Marin cluster did not fall, and they gave me a medal and they wrote me into the songs. But that is not the story. The story is what Sergeant Mara Quinn said to me afterward, in the gray hour after, when we were both leaning against the cold wall of the holdfast, and neither of us could feel our limbs, and the 19 were laid out under tarps in a neat row that her surviving soldiers would not stop standing near. She looked at me, this small, soft-skinned creature who had just walked into a tide and come back out, and she said something that I have spent 20 years failing to fully understand and failing to ever forget. I will tell you what she said. But not tonight. Tonight you have heard enough to keep you awake, and that is good because I want you awake. I want you turning it over the way I have turned it over for 20 years. The truth about humans in combat is not that they are strong or fast or fearless. I will tell you what it is, and I will tell you what it cost me to learn it, and I will tell you why my own people are not entirely sure they trust me anymore. But first you have to sit with the thing I sat with at the top of that gully. 60 soldiers, 3 lives already counted as lost, and not one of them, not a single one, asked whether it was worth it. That is where I will stop for now. Come back and I will tell you the rest. You came back, good. I told you that you would. Sit down. Last time I left you at the top of the gully, with the 19 under their tarps and Sergeant Quinn leaning on the cold wall beside me. I told you she said something I have never forgotten and never fully understood. You have had time to wonder about it. I have watched you wonder. So let me give it to you now, and then let me tell you what it set in motion, because the line was only the beginning. What came after Kareth is the part that turned me into the thing your elders argue about when they think I cannot hear. Here is what she said. We were both wrecked. I could not feel 3 of my 4 limbs. Her face had that gray sheen the softskins get when they have spent everything they had and a little more. We were watching her soldiers stand near the dead, not doing anything, just standing, the way you might stand near someone sleeping so they would not wake alone. And I asked her. I had to. I am a counting people and the count made no sense to me, so I asked her the only question that mattered. I said you lost 19 to save 3. You lost more than you saved. Why? She did not look at me right away. She watched her people standing near the tarps, and then she said, because the 3 didn't know we were coming, and I never want my people to die thinking nobody was coming. That was all. She did not explain it. She did not defend it. She said it the way you state a law of the universe, a thing that is simply true whether or not it is convenient, and then she pushed herself off the wall and went to stand near the dead with the rest of them, because apparently that was a thing you did, and I was left holding those words with all 4 of my hands and no idea where to put them. I never want my people to die thinking nobody was coming. Turn it over, I have, for 20 years, because the first time I heard it I thought it was sentiment, weakness dressed up as principle. We Thren have a hard word for it. We call it the soft fault, the place where feeling overrides function, and we train it out of our young because feeling that overrides function gets cohorts killed. By every measure I had been raised inside, Quinn's 19 were a catastrophic failure of command. She traded a sustainable loss for an unsustainable one to recover 3 soldiers who were, in the cold arithmetic, already spent. But here is the thing that took me years to see. The math she would not leave out was not bad math. It was math with a longer horizon than mine. I will explain, but to explain it I have to take you off Kareth, because Kareth was only where I started to see it. Where I understood it was a world called Hesperin, 18 months later, and Hesperin is the part of my service they do not put in the songs. After Kareth they reorganized us. Someone in the high command had read the after-action reports and decided that mixing Thren discipline with human, whatever the humans had, made for an effective unit. They were half right, which is the most dangerous thing a high command can be. They folded what was left of Quinn's company into my cohort. 41 humans, give or take the wounded who came back, attached to the Vorlon line under my command. By then I had been bumped up. Sethik Vorlon had been pulled to a staff posting, and the cohort was mine, and the humans came with it. Quinn and I had an understanding by then. It was not friendship. I do not know that a Thren and a human can be friends the way 2 humans are, or 2 Thren, but it was something. We had stood in the same gap. She had watched me break an order I had no business breaking, and I had watched her walk into a tide for 3 lives, and after that there is a kind of honesty between 2 soldiers that does not need a name. She taught me things on the long transit to Hesperin, not on purpose. She just talked, the way they all did, and I listened the way I had learned too. I asked her once directly the question my whole people would have asked. I said, your way costs more soldiers. Over a long war your way must cost you more soldiers than my way costs me. How are there any of you left? She thought about it for a long time. Humans do that. They sit with a hard question instead of answering it fast, and I have come to respect it more than I can say. Then she said, you're counting bodies, that's the only number you trust, but there's a number you're not counting. And she tapped the side of her head. How many of your soldiers would walk into that gully for you, right now, no order, just because it was you down there? I did not answer, because the honest answer was that I did not know. And a commander who does not know that does not say it out loud. I know mine would, she said, all of them, every time, because they've all watched it happen the other way. They've watched somebody go back for them when the math said don't. So when I tell them to hold, they hold like the whole world depends on it because they know I'd burn the world down before I'd leave them. That's the number you're not counting, Athek. You count what loyalty costs. You never count what it's worth. I want you to sit with that the way I had to, because that is the first half of the truth about humans in combat, and it is not the soft fault. It is the hardest thing in the universe, and it only looks soft to people who have never seen what it builds. A Thren cohort fights to a percentage. When the loss tips past tolerance, we fall back. That is not cowardice. It is design. We are built to survive, to endure, to be the wall that is still there tomorrow. But there is a ceiling on what a wall built that way can do, and the ceiling is this. A soldier who knows he will be abandoned when the math turns will fight only up to the math. He will not fight past it. Why would he? He has been taught correctly that past a certain point his own command will spend him. So he fights to the line and not one step further, because beyond the line there is no one coming. A human fights past the line, every time, because a human, a real one, trained the way Quinn trained hers, has been shown again and again that there is no line past which they get left. There is no math that counts them out. And a soldier who knows all the way down in his animal body that someone will come for him no matter what, fights like the math does not apply to him, because for him it does not. That is the engine. Loyalty that is total and proven and never once betrayed builds soldiers who do not have a ceiling. I did not fully believe it until Hesperin. Hesperin was a colony world, and the Vor had it half taken when we dropped. Not a frozen rock this time. A green world, warm, with a sky the color of a bruise from all the burning. There were people there. That was the difference. Kareth had nothing but soldiers and stone. Hesperin had farms and towns, and a few 100,000 colonists. The Vor had been pushing into the southern peninsula for weeks, and our job was to open a corridor through the occupied middle of the continent and get those colonists to the evacuation ships in the north before the Vor finished what they had started. It was a relief operation. On paper. In practice, it was the worst kind of fighting there is, the kind where you cannot simply choose good ground and hold it, because the ground you have to hold is full of people who cannot fight and cannot run fast and will not leave their homes until the fire is at the door. And here is where my two halves came into conflict. The Thren half and the half Quinn had been quietly building in me on the transit, and the conflict nearly tore the cohort apart before the Vor ever got the chance. Because the math on Hesperin was brutal and clear. We did not have the force to hold the whole corridor. The Vor were going to break through somewhere. The Thren solution, the correct solution, the one I would have given a year and a half earlier without a flicker of doubt, was to pick the line we could hold, fall back to it, and accept that the colonists on the far side of that line would not make it out. Spend the ground. Spend the people who could not be saved. Save the percentage that could. I stood in the command post on the third night of the corridor fight, and I looked at the map and I saw exactly which town we would have to give up. It had a number, not a name, on our maps. Settlement 4, 11,000 colonists. The math said give it up, fall back, hold the narrow place behind it, save the 80,000 still moving north. 11,000 for 80,000. By every measure I had been raised inside, it was not even a hard call. It was arithmetic. I gave the order to fall back to the narrow place. And Quinn would not take it. It was different this time than Kareth, and I need you to understand how, because this is the night I started to become the thing your elders distrust. On Kareth she had defied a man who was not me over 3 soldiers, and I had broken my own order to help her. On Hesperin she defied me, my order, my command. Over 11,000 people who were not soldiers at all, who could do nothing for us, who were exactly the kind of loss my entire people would have written off without losing a night's sleep. She came into the command post and she put both her hands flat on the map table over Settlement 4 and she said, "We can hold the corridor open one more night." 1. I've walked it. There's a rail cut south of the settlement, defensible. My people plus your second section can plug it. One more night and we get the 11,000 moving. Then we fall back. And I said the thing I had been raised to say. I said, one more night costs us. The Vor will commit their reserve. We will take losses we cannot replace, holding ground for people who add nothing to the line. The math does not. Say it, she said, quietly. Say the math doesn't include them, go ahead. And I could not. Because I had heard her say the opposite on Kareth, leaning against a cold wall with 19 of her own under tarps, and I had spent 18 months learning that the woman was not soft and was not wrong. She was just counting a longer ledger than I knew how to read. So I asked her the real question, the commander's question, the one I had to ask because the lives of my own cohort were the coin she was asking me to spend. I said, if I hold one more night for 11,000 farmers and it breaks the corridor and the 80,000 behind them die too, what then? You will have traded 80 for 11. Is that your longer ledger? She straightened up, and she gave me an answer I did not expect, an answer that was not about feeling at all. She said, "It won't break the corridor because my people will hold the rail cut past anything you think is possible, and you know why. Because there are 11,000 civilians behind them who'll die if they fold. You keep telling me loyalty's a luxury. Put my soldiers in front of 11,000 people who'll die if they take one step back, and watch what loyalty does to a defensive line. It doesn't get weaker, Othek. It gets a ceiling ripped off it. Give me the rail cut. I'll show you the truth about how humans fight, and you'll never count the same way again." I gave her the rail cut. I want to be honest about why, because the songs would tell it as a moment of moral clarity, the alien commander choosing mercy, and that is not what it was. It was not clean. I gave her the rail cut because 18 months of listening had put a crack in the wall I was built to be, and through that crack I could no longer not see the 11,000 as people. The math still said fall back. The math was, in the narrow horizon, correct. But I had started to see the longer ledger Quinn was always reading, the one where you count not just what loyalty costs but what it is worth. And on that ledger, abandoning 11,000 people to save a percentage was a debt that would come due somewhere I could not yet see. So I split the cohort. I sent my second section south with Quinn's 41 to plug the rail cut below Settlement 4, and I held the corridor's spine with the rest, and we bought the night. I was not at the rail cut. I have always regretted that I was not there to see it with my own forward-facing eyes, because the soldiers who were there have never been able to make me fully understand it. And I am a soldier myself, and I have stood in a gap on Kareth, and even I cannot picture what they describe. They held the rail cut against the committed Vor reserve for 11 hours. 41 humans and 90 Thren of my second section, in a railway cut south of a settlement that had a number and not a name, against a tide that should have rolled over them in the first hour. The Thren fought the way Thren fight, well, disciplined, to a high tolerance. But the humans, my Thren told me afterward, the humans fought in a way that did not make sense, because there was no point in the fight where they reached the place a sane soldier reaches, the place where the math turns and the body says enough. They never reached it. The wounded would not leave the line. Quinn put a man with a shattered leg behind a rifle and propped him on the cut wall, and he held a sector by himself for 3 hours because he would not be the gap the children behind him fell through. And the strangest part, the part that I think matters most, the part that is the second half of the truth I keep promising you, they did not become animals doing it. You would think soldiers fighting past every limit, soldiers who would not break, would become something terrible, would fight with the kind of cruelty that has no bottom. The Vor are like that. The Vor have no bottom. But the humans held that cut for 11 hours, and when a wave of Vor broke and some of them tried to flee back down the rail line, my Thren told me the humans let them go. They did not chase. They did not finish them. Quinn's voice came over the channel and said, "Hold the line, do not pursue," and they held, and they let the broken enemy run. A Thren officer asked her why afterward. "We do not let a broken enemy run. A broken enemy regroups and comes back. The math says finish them." And Quinn said, "We're not here to kill Vor. We're here to get 11,000 people out. The second we start chasing kills, we're fighting for ourselves and the cut's already lost. Hold the line. The line's the only thing that matters." That is the second half. Write it down because your elders will not tell it to you this way. The truth about humans in combat is not only that they will not be abandoned, so they fight without a ceiling. It is also that the reason they fight without a ceiling is not hatred, and not glory, and not the kill. It is that they are standing in front of something. Always. They fight hardest not when they want to destroy, but when they have decided that the thing behind them will not fall while they are still breathing. And a soldier fighting to protect has a bottom that a soldier fighting to destroy does not. He can fight past every limit and still, when the enemy breaks and runs, let them run, because the running enemy is no longer a threat to the thing behind him, and the thing behind him is the only thing he was ever fighting for. That is what makes them dangerous, not the ferocity. The ferocity is just the engine. What makes them dangerous is that the ferocity has a purpose outside itself, and so it never burns the soldier down into something that loses its way. They go all the way to the edge of what a living thing can do, and they come back from the edge every time because they always know exactly what they are standing in front of. The 11,000 got out, all of them. The corridor held. The 80,000 got out too, every one north to the ships, because the night Quinn bought at the rail cut let the whole evacuation finish before the VOR could close it. Her longer ledger was right. It was right the way it had been right on Kareth, the way it was always going to be right, because she was counting a number I had been trained my whole life not to see, and once I saw it, I could not stop seeing it. We lost soldiers at the rail cut. We lost good Thren of my second section, and we lost human soldiers who had walked out of the Kareth Gully only to die in a railway cut 18 months later in front of farmers they had never met. Quinn stood by the tarps again afterward, the way she always did, and I stood with her this time, and I did not ask her why any more, because I finally understood. But I have not yet told you the part that made my own people uneasy. I have not told you what I did with this truth, or what it cost me to bring it home, or why there are Thren in the high command who think the frost star on my chest is a mistake. That is the last part, and it is the hardest, because it is not about a battle. It is about what happens to a soldier who learns something true on a far green world and then has to carry it back to people who would rather not know. Come back one more time. I will tell you how the truth followed me home and what it asked of me and why I am telling it to you now instead of taking it quietly to my death. For tonight, hold this. The most dangerous soldier in the galaxy is not the one who wants to kill you. It is the one who has decided that something behind him will not fall. And the second most dangerous thing in the galaxy is a commander who finally learns to count what that is worth. This is the last night. So drink and listen, because what I am going to tell you now is the part that the frost star was supposed to bury, and I have decided I am too old to let it stay buried. I told you about Kareth, where I learned that humans will not leave each other behind. I told you about Hesperin, where I learned that the reason they fight without a ceiling is that they are always standing in front of something, and that this is what gives their ferocity a bottom that the VOR will never have. You have the two halves of the truth now. You think the story is over. It is not over, because a truth like that does not stay on a battlefield. It comes home with you. And what it asks of you when it gets home is harder than anything it asked of you in the gully or the rail cut. Quinn died on a world I will not name, because the naming of it is classified and because I do not want to say it out loud even now. It was not a glorious death. There was no tide, no gully, no 11,000 farmers. There was a bad extraction and a collapsed structure and a soldier pinned under it. One of hers, a young one, and Quinn went back in when the building was already coming down because the young one did not know anyone was coming, and Mara Quinn never wanted one of her people to die thinking nobody was coming. The building took them both. They came out together, which I think she would have counted as the math working. I was not there. I was a sector away, holding a line the proper way, the Thren way, and by the time I heard it was done. I did not grieve the way humans grieve. We do not have it in us, that loud open thing they do, the standing near the dead, the saying of names. But I will tell you what I did because it is the beginning of the last part. I went and I stood near where they had laid her, alone in the gray hour, the way I had watched her stand near her own dead twice before. I did not know what to do with my 4 hands, so I just stood. And I understood, standing there, that the truth she had spent 4 years pouring into me was now mine to carry. Because she was gone, and almost no one else had learned it the way I had, all the way down in the body and not just the mind. So I carried it home. When the war turned, and it did turn, the conquered pulled its decorated officers back to the core worlds to teach, to pass on what had been learned. I was one of them. The frost star, the two clasps, the holder of Kareth, the officer who opened the Hesperin corridor. They wanted me to teach the next generation of Thren commanders how to win. So I stood in front of a hall of young Thren officers, the best we had, the calmest and the sharpest, the ones being groomed for the high command. And I taught them the truth about humans in combat, the whole of it, Kareth and Hesperin and the rail cut and the longer ledger. I taught them that loyalty which is total and proven and never once betrayed builds soldiers without a ceiling. I taught them that a soldier fighting to protect has a bottom that a soldier fighting to destroy does not. I taught them the number we do not count, the worth of loyalty, and not just its cost. I gave them everything Quinn gave me, everything that 4 years and a green world and a railway cut and a collapsed building had cost to learn. And the high command tried to stop me. Not all at once. They are not crude, the high command. They did it the Thren way, with reviews and adjustments and recommendations. A senior officer of the staff came to me after one of the early sessions, a calm, counting Thren of the old kind, the kind I used to be, and he told me with great respect that my curriculum was being revised, that certain of my conclusions were not suitable for instruction, that I might continue to teach the tactics of Kareth and Hesperin, the dispositions, the timings, the ground, but that I was to stop teaching the rest. The rest, he would not say the word, so I said it for him. I said, "You want me to stop teaching them why it worked?" And he said, in that flat, calm tone I knew so well because it had once been my own, "We want you to stop teaching them to count a number that cannot be counted. Loyalty without a ceiling is not a doctrine, Athek. It is a way to lose a cohort. You are teaching our young to abandon the math that has kept us alive for 100 years. You are teaching them the soft fault and calling it strength. The humans could afford it. They had something we do not have, some animal thing in them, and even with it they died in numbers we could never sustain. We cannot build a people on it. You will teach the ground and the timings. You will not teach the rest. And here, young ones, is the moment. Here is the thing I did that has put a quiet question mark on the frost star, the thing your elders argue about, the reason there are Thren in the high command who will not quite meet my eyes. I refused. I, a Thren officer, raised inside the count, built to be a wall, the holder of Kareth, refused a directive of the high command. And I will tell you exactly why, because it is the third truth, the one underneath the other two, the one Quinn was teaching me the whole time without ever saying it plainly. I said to him, "You are right that we cannot afford to lose cohorts the way the humans lost them. You are right that their way, taken whole, would break us. But you have heard only half of what I have been teaching because you have heard it through the wall you are, the wall I used to be. You think I am teaching our young to throw away the math. I am not. I am teaching them to count one more thing in it. That is all, one more number, the worth of the soldier who knows he will not be left. You can keep all your other math. Keep your tolerances, keep your sustainable rates, keep the wall. But put one human number into the Thren count, just one, and you do not get a weaker people. You get a people whose wall, for the first time in 100 years, has no ceiling either." He did not answer. He left. The curriculum was revised over my refusal formally on the record. The official instruction teaches the ground and the timings of Kareth and Hesperin and not the rest. I am, on paper, a holder of the frost star who exceeded his role. But here is what they could not put on the record. They could not stop me teaching it the way Quinn taught me. Not in the hall. In the gray hours after, to the young ones who came and asked, the way you came and asked. The truth does not pass through a curriculum. It never did. It passes the way it passed to me, soldier to soldier, in the cold quiet after, when one of you leans forward with that hunger in your face and asks the real question. And so I have spent the years since teaching it the only way it can be taught, one young Thren at a time, in rooms like this one, with the frost star in its glass case down the hall as proof that the thing works, and a quiet directive on file saying it must not be taught. That is why your elders are uneasy with me, not because I am wrong. They know I am not wrong. Kareth held. Hesperin held. The numbers are in the records. They are uneasy because I am right in a way that asks them to change, and a people built to be a wall does not change easily, and a wall that has held for 100 years has 1,000 good reasons not to learn that it has been carrying a ceiling it never needed. So now you know the whole of it. Let me put the three truths in your hands one last time, plainly, the way I wish someone had put them in mine before I had to learn them in a gully. The first truth is that a soldier who knows, all the way down, that he will never be abandoned, fights without a ceiling. Loyalty that is total and proven and never once betrayed is not a sentiment. It is the most powerful weapon system ever built, and it is built out of nothing but kept promises. The second truth is that the ferocity which has no ceiling also has a bottom, but only when the soldier is standing in front of something. A soldier fighting to protect goes all the way to the edge and comes back. A soldier fighting to destroy goes to the edge and falls off it and becomes the vor. The humans were the most dangerous thing I ever fought beside precisely because they always knew what they were standing in front of. And the third truth, the one underneath, the one that cost me the High Command's trust, is this. You do not have to become the humans to learn from them. You do not throw away your math. You add one number to it. You count what loyalty is worth and not only what it costs, and you keep every kept promise you make until your soldiers know in their bodies that no count will ever leave them. And then you watch the ceiling come off a wall that has stood for 100 years. That is the truth about humans in combat. That is what shocked me, a calm counting Thren, into the thing I became. That is what I have given my last years to teaching, against the directive, one of you at a time. You asked me, the first night, what makes a human dangerous. I have answered you across 3 nights and a war. But I will give you the answer in one line now, the way Quinn would have, because she could always say in one line what took me 4 years to understand. The most dangerous soldier in the galaxy is not the one who is willing to die. We have those. The Vor have endless ones. The most dangerous soldier in the galaxy is the one who has been shown, again and again and never once betrayed, that someone will always come for him. Because that soldier has no ceiling, and he never loses his way, and he will hold a line in front of strangers until the building comes down on him, and he will do it certain, all the way down, that he is not alone. Mara Quinn taught me that. She taught it to me in a gully and a rail cut, and finally under a collapsed building she walked into so that a frightened young soldier would not die thinking nobody was coming. I have been coming for that truth ever since. And tonight, by telling it to you, against the directive, in the gray hour, with the frost star locked in its case down the hall, I have made sure that no matter what happens to me, the truth itself will not die thinking nobody was coming. Now go carry it, add the number. And when your turn comes, and it will, go back for them. Every time, even when the math says don't. Especially then.